Lesson 6 is going to be solving systems of quadratic and linear equations. In the last lesson, we learned about how if we had pictures, we could see where the graph would cross through, the line would cross through the U shape. Now we're going to look at it in the terms of if I give you the equations, how can we figure out the same answers? So this will be done algebraically. So there's some information here. Basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting two equations equal to each other. And I know it's very exciting for you, but the quadratic formula is back. So I'm going to show you how to do these problems. We're going to set them up. So both equations that are given example 1 are set as y equals. So what we're going to do, because we know that y equals both of these things, we're going to take these two parts and we're going to set them equal to each other. And my suggestion would always be to write the squared equation first. So I'm going to write x squared plus 2x minus 6 equals, and then I'm going to take the second part, the 5x plus 12, and write that next. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do two things in the same wall and floor. I want to set this equal to 0. So I'm setting them equal to each other. And now I'm going to set them equal to 0. So here's how we do that. Wall and floor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 5x, and I want to write it underneath the other x value. So I need to have this organized. And in the same step, I'm going to take the 12 and move it over as well. And I want to write it underneath the number. So basically everything on the right side cancels, setting this equal to 0. And then I'm just going to add going down. So x squared comes down, and then 2 and negative 5 equals negative 3x, and negative 6 and negative 12 is negative 18. So at this point here, we have a quadratic equation. And what we can do with this is we can use the quadratic formula. So just to review, I think it's up on the top of the screen here. Our formula is right here. I'm going to use that. I have to find my A, B, and C and then work it out. So you can kind of label them in the problem. I'm going to write it off to the side as well. A equals 1, B equals negative 3, and C equals negative 18. I'm going to plug those numbers into the quadratic formula now. So quadratic formula is x equals negative b, or opposite sign of b, so it's going to be positive 3 plus or minus the square root. In your first parenthesis, you put your b value and square it, minus 4 times the a value, which is 1, times the c value, which is negative 18, all over 2 times the a value, which is 1. If you recall, the next step is to take everything under the square root and put it in your calculator. So that's what we'll do. All right, so I'm going to type in parenthesis negative 3, close the parenthesis and square it, minus 4 times 1 times negative 18. Make sure you take your signs with it or you'll get the wrong answer. And I get 81. So I'm going to replace that string of numbers with 81. So I have x equals 3 plus or minus square root 81 over 2 times 1 is 2. So 81, we're going to check and see if it's a perfect square. And it is. It equals 9. So I get to rewrite this again. So I have 3 plus or minus, and I'm replacing the square root of 81 with the number 9 over 2. Now I'm left with only numbers. That means I can break this into two separate problems. 3 plus 9 divided by 2, and then 3 minus 9 divided by 2. By the way, what we're doing here is we're just solving for x. So I'm going to put those two in the calculator. 3 plus 9 divided by 2. I get 6, and then I'm going to do the same thing over again. 3 minus 9 divided by 2, and I get negative 3. So I have 6 and negative 3 as my two x values. So if you recall from the last lesson, we had ordered pairs as our answers. So since we have two numbers that are x values, what I need to do now is I need to take these answers. So I'm going to make a little note over here. Let's do light blue. All right, last step. I need to take my two values that I found, my x values, and I need to plug them in to find out what y is. So I'm going to take the first equation from the original part, y equals, and I need to plug in for x the two numbers I just got. So 5 instead of x, I'm going to put 6 plus 12, and I'm going to do it again. Y equals 5 times the x value negative 3 plus 12. This is going to give me my y value answers. So y equals, and I could put this all in my calculator or solve it in my head, however it works for you. 5 times 6 is 30. 30 plus 12 is 42. So that's my y value that goes with 6. And then 5 times negative 3 is negative 15 plus 12. Y equals negative 3. So that's the pair that matches with this. So I'm going to highlight so you can see what I'm talking about. So our 6 value matches up with the 42. And then our negative 3 value matches up with the negative 3 here. So we have two final answers that I'm going to write in ordered pair form. So we have x, which is 6, with the 42. That's one ordered pair where the U shape and the line would match. And then I have negative 3 as my other x value that matched with the negative 3 answer for your y value. So these are your two final answers. Okay, so we're going to try one again. So we'll go through the steps kind of a lot. We're going to take our two things and we're going to set them equal to each other first. Now I want to make it set equal to 0, so I'm going to do a wall and floor. Minus x, I put it right underneath the other x value, and then plus 7 underneath the number. So everything on this side equals 0 now, and I can add going down. X squared, negative 8 and negative 1 is negative 9x. 13 and 7 is 20. Now it's time to do quadratic formula. So A equals 1, B equals negative 9, and C equals 20. So I will plug that into the formula up here. So x equals, so we're solving for x right now. We still will have to find the y value in the end. So negative b, opposite sign of b, so positive 9 plus or minus the square root. First parenthesis is your b value, squared minus 4 times the a value, which is 1, times the c value, which is 20, all over 2 times the a value, which is 1. Now I need to put that part under the square root into the calculator to see what that equals. So I'm typing the numbers in, minus 4 times 1 times 20. And I get 1 as my final number. So I'm replacing all of that with a 1. So x equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 2 times 1 is 2. The square root of 1 is a perfect square. It actually equals 1. So I'm going to rewrite this again. 9 plus or minus 1 over 2. So I have an equation with all numbers. That means I can split them into two separate problems. which I'll do over here. 9 plus 1 divided by 2, and then 9 minus 1 divided by 2. So if I do the math, 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. That's one x value. And then 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. That's my second x value. What I'm going to do with these two numbers is I'm going to use the original equation, the y equals x, and I'm going to plug in my two x values that I've found to figure out what y is going to equal. So y equals, and instead of x I'm putting in the 5 minus 7. Put that in parentheses so you see that I'm replacing the x value. And then I'm going to write it again. Y equals 4 minus 7. Put that in parentheses. So now I can just do the math. Y equals 5 minus 7, which is negative 2. And y equals 4 minus 7, which is negative 3. So I have my x values that match with my y values, so I have two ordered pairs. So final answer, the x is 5. That matches with the negative 2, the y value. And I have the 4, the x value, and the negative 3 that matches with that. Try another example. Okay, so this next one gives us our y equals 2 and then our other equation. We're going to set them equal to each other just like we have been doing. So I'm going to write the squared equation first. And then I want to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to do a wall and floor. The only thing I need to move is the minus 2. So I have x squared minus 8x, and 18 minus 2 is 16. Now I can do I can do the quadratic formula. So my a value is 1, b is negative 8, and c is 16. I'm going to plug those numbers into quadratic formula. So I have x equals opposite sign of b, so 8 plus or minus the square root, negative 8 in the parenthesis for your b value, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 16, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So now I need to put that in the calculator, the part underneath the square root, and see what that equals. Okay, and I get 0. That's different. You guys haven't seen anything like that yet. So I'm going to replace everything. X equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2 times 1 is 2. So we're going to go a little further with this and see what happens. So the square root of 0 is just 0. So basically what you're going to see here, 8 plus or minus 0 over 2, because there's a 0 at the end, what this means is that we only have one answer. We have basically like saying 8 divided by 2. So the plus minus part and the 0 cancel out, and so x equals 4. So we only have one answer, and if you notice in the very beginning, y equals 2, we don't even have to do any solving here for the y value. So our final answer is just one ordered pair, and it's x is 4 and y is 2. So this is a one solution problem. And we saw that in the U shape in the line where the line only touches at one spot. Okay, last example. Or I'm sorry, there's two more examples. All right, time to set these equal to 0. So I write my squared part first. Set it equal to the second equation, negative 3x minus 12. I'm going to do my wall and floor. I want to add 3x, put it underneath the other x. And then I want to add 12 and put it underneath the 8. Add going down, x squared, 6 plus 3 is 9x. 8 plus 12 is 20. And everything on the right side equals 0. Now I can do the quadratic formula. A equals 1, B equals 9, C equals 20. So I'm going to solve that. X equals opposite sign of B, so negative 9 plus or minus. First parenthesis, B value, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 20, all over 2 times A, which is 1. Now I'm going to put the part under the square root into the calculator. And I get 1 as my answer. So I'm going to write that up here. We have x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 1 over 2 times 1 is 2. So I know that the square root of 1 is a perfect square. It actually equals 1. So I'm going to write x equals negative 9 plus or minus 1 over 2. So I have all just regular numbers, so I can separate it into two problems here. So I have negative 9 plus 1 divided by 2, and then negative 9 minus 1 divided by 2. I'm going to do the math in my head here. Negative 9 plus 1 is negative 8, divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 9 minus 1 is negative 10. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So I've found my x value for both parts where it's crossing through. And then I'm going to take my linear equation here and use that to solve for the y value. So y equals negative 3 times x. I know my x is negative 4 minus 12. And then I'm going to do it again one more time. Negative 3 instead of x, I'm putting in negative 5 minus 12. So I could put this in the calculator, or I could solve it in my head if I know it. So negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12 minus 12. That would equal 0. And then negative 3 times negative 5 is 15 minus 12. 15 minus 12 is 3. So I have my matchers right here, this negative 4 and the y equals 0. And then my other two that are matching negative 5 and 3. So I can write my final answer. Negative 4, 0, and negative 5 and 3. All right, one last problem to go through. Okay, this one looks a little different, but it's not too bad. Okay, so I'm going to take my squared term and write it first. So x squared minus 3 equals 8x plus 6. If you notice there's no x value on the left side, that's okay. But I need to move the 8x to the other side. So I'm going to kind of put it in between here because I know that's where my x value usually goes. And then minus 6 at the end. So I have x squared. I only have negative 8x, nothing to combine it with, so I bring it down. And then negative 3 minus 6 is negative 9. Then everything cancels, equaling 0. So next I do quadratic formula. A equals 1, B equals negative 8, C equals negative 9. Plug the numbers in. X equals opposite sign of B, so 8 plus or minus the square root. Negative 8 goes in the parenthesis first, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is negative 9, all over 2 times A, which is 1. So now this is where my calculator comes into play. Put all that in the calculator to find out what that equals under the square root. So negative 8 in parentheses, and then I square it, minus 4 times 1 times negative 9. And I get 100. So I'm going to replace that with 100. So I'm going to write x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of 100 divided by 2. The square root of 100 is a perfect square. It actually equals 10. So I'm going to rewrite again. 8 plus or minus 10 divided by 2. Since I have two numbers, or all three are numbers, no square roots, that means I could split it into two problems. 8 plus 10 divided by 2, and then 8 minus 10 divided by 2. So 8 plus 10 is 18, divided by 2 is 9. So that's one of my x values. 8 minus 10 is negative 2. Negative 2 divided by positive 2 is negative 1. That's my second x answer. I'm now going to take those two x values and plug it into the linear term that was on the top. So I'm going to write y equals 8, and instead of the x, put 9 plus 6, and then I'm going to do this again. 8 times the x value of negative 1 plus 6. So now I can do the math. 8 times 9 is 72. 72 plus 6 is 78. So that's one of my y values. And then 8 times negative 1 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. So I have these two numbers that match. Those are an ordered pair. So we have our final answer of 9, 78. And my second numbers that match our x value and the y value that are an ordered pair, negative 1 and negative 2. And that concludes this lesson.